Good morning, everybody. My name is Nikki Lee. I'm a doctoral student in the sociology department here and one of the diversity and community fellows here at UC Berkeley. And I'll be the moderator for this amazing graduate experience diversity session on Funding 101 Master's Edition. As a reminder, live captioning is available and the session is being recorded. As questions come up for you, please put them in the Q&A. The chat isn't open to my knowledge. And we might not be able to answer all the questions today. Our amazing people might not be able to answer them, but you can always reach out to the Office of Graduate Diversity at graddiversity@berkeley.edu. Or come to my office hours, but you may also want to reach out to the amazing individuals who will be presenting some useful information today as well. So I will just put that link in the chat just in case. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to our amazing kind of facilitator today. Take it away.
Hi everyone, good morning still. My name is Deanne Rivera. I am part of the funding team here at UC Berkeley. Just want to extend a welcome and let you know that we're going to be going over a lot of information today for those of you who are interested in any master's or professional programs here at UC Berkeley. I just wanted to list that tomorrow's presentation will be around the PhD programs and funding for PhD programs. So you're more than welcome to attend that as well, but I wanted just to share that today we're working closely with master's and professional programs. So I have my colleagues on this call as well, Ken, Michael, Ava, and Gina. They're gonna be helping answer questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If they cannot get to your question today, we can pull that and then do some research and let you know at a later time what that answer is. So I just wanted to share that with you all. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to list this information here. This is Arlen, and if you have any questions or you want to connect with somebody who's actually a student, you're able to do that. And you can make an appointment with Arlen and just to discuss and any of your concerns, or even just get an idea of how she was able to fund her time here and her experience. So just wanted to lift that and share that. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to cover a lot of information, like I mentioned. We're going to cover everything from what the total cost of attendance is and what does that mean, to the time that you are a student here, how things might change for you, what kind of funding is available for that. And then kind of go through and try to fill in the blanks everywhere in between. A lot of times when students come into a program, they're not really sure where they go for support. And we want to make sure that you are aware that in every program, there is what's called a student affairs officer. And that is your main contact to anybody in your department for academics, for funding, for any questions that you might have. That is your go-to person. They're designed to be a support for you. And if you have any questions about who your GSAO is, it's always listed on your CalCentral homepage. So if you had any questions, let's say a year from now, and you were not really sure who your GSAO is, or you worked with one and now you don't think that person's there anymore, please make sure that you check back and you look at your CalCentral for that most updated information. When we go into how much is it going to cost, it really depends. And so there's academic masters, so there's a MA and an MS. There's professional master's degrees, and you can see that there, mostly business, public health, social welfare, city planning, things like that. Those are going to have what's called a professional degree supplemental tuition. And so we'll get into that a little bit more, but it's actually a separate tuition that is charged per program. And so just be mindful of that as you start planning your time and planning your programming, what that actually involved and what that can entail. And then there's a last program, it's called a self-supporting master's program. And those generally are going to be shorter in length, maybe a year to a year and a half. They usually meet on the weekends or over the summer, but it's not necessarily a traditional in-class for a 2-year program. So that's just a slight difference in what a self-supporting program is. When we talk about the costs, aside from the differences of the program, this university will put together a total cost of attendance for you. And so that is going to look like everything that it costs for you to be a student in a master's or professional program. So the base of it is going to be tuition and fees, right? And then room and board. Regardless if you live on campus or off campus, you will have room and board included in your cost of attendance. Books and supplies will also be a part of that. So some programs have different fee structures as far as supplies. Again, just depends on the program, so just be mindful of that. Transportation, commuting costs is also included in your budget, personal expenses, and lastly, health insurance. If you already have health insurance, you will have an opportunity to waive out of the university coverage. If you do not have health insurance, this will be a mandatory fee for you to pay. So again, be mindful of that. If you do have health insurance, then that can be waived, and there are specific deadlines. So please make sure you pay attention to that as you start to think about this program. The first type of funding that I want to go over and share with you are loans. That is a big majority of how some students are able to fund their education. What the first step is doing is the FAFSA, and you would do that online, and our school code is there, it's 001312. You want to make sure that you put that into the FAFSA so that UC Berkeley receives your information and then can send out some information to you. This is also, the FAFSA is also useful if, let's say, maybe you're not interested in loans, right? But maybe you are interested in work study, where you work on campus, receive a paycheck like you would any other job. And that is helpful as well, because the FAFSA is going to dictate how much eligibility you have through work study. So the FAFSA in itself is just a snapshot of information, financial information of your household at the time that you file it. If there's any changes, or if there's any questions, or there's anything that you want to change, you would definitely talk to our financial aid office. And our financial aid office, you can think of it as the department that all the FAFSAs live in, and all the information regarding your FAFSA will be shared from the financial aid office. We encourage all students to complete a FAFSA, regardless if you're interested in loans or not. It's just a nice way to have some information on file, just in case you might need a loan, or just in case you might need emergency funding or something like that. Again, we do encourage students to file it if they are eligible. The fee structure, again, the funding for different programs can look like a variety of things. So, okay, we have loans, right? But what else is there? So there's funding from your specific department, and that could look like department awards, department grants, department endowments. It can also look like employment through the department. And then we move on to like the larger scope of funding, which is campus funding. And so that would be funding from like the graduate division. It could be any centers on campus and research groups on campus as well that are available and have funding for certain programs. So that's, again, something, a broader component of what the funding might look like for you as a student. I'm going to talk a little bit about student appointments because it's different from work study, from what I talked about just a couple seconds ago. But student appointments are slightly different. Student appointments are where you are an instructor, a researcher, tutor, any type of thing that falls under academic work. And you receive what's called a fee remission for that. So a fee remission could be your tuition, your campus tuition fee, and then also a salary. And so that's slightly different than work study. But I want you to be aware that program does exist, and that it is available for students who are in professional and also master's programs. Once you get closer to the academic year, so in the fall, if you are interested in an academic appointment, we'll redirect you over to Handshake, which is a website that lists all of the open positions on campus. You don't have to necessarily apply for a position in which you're studying. So for example, if you're an education major, you don't necessarily have to look for an appointment within the School of Education. You can look anywhere on campus. And so that's something that is slightly flexible for you and your interest. So again, closer to the fall, it'll go ahead and open up some information for you there. For more information about funding, because there's a lot of information out there, we want to direct you to our website. And there's a lot of information about funding, what the policies are. If you have some questions about appointments, there's a lot of information in what's called our appointment handbook, and that's listed on our website. And then also division contacts. And so if you have a question specifically about a program or specifically about a fellowship that you read about, that will direct you to the person who is actually administering that. While you are a student here, and should you find yourself in the need of some emergency funding because you are unable to access some of your basic needs, and that would include housing, food, technology, healthcare, in some cases transportation. I want to make sure that you're all aware that we have a pretty robust basic needs department on campus. And they not only are there to support you through a food pantry, through application services for CalFresh, for connection to legal services or housing services. There's also, if you need a housing security deposit, if you need support with rent, again, it is intended to be an emergency-based funding resource. And so if you find yourself in a position while you're here at Cal, please make sure that you reach out to the Basic Needs Center to get all of the resources that they were able to support you with. I also want to list a program called our Student and Caregiver Grant. Now, this is a program that if you are a student parent or you have you are responsible for an adult dependent, the graduate division does have a program that could support you with grants up to $13,000 for a parent and up to $8,000 for a caregiver. So we want to make sure that you are aware of that and that support is available to you. Also, to support parents, we do have some things that are looped into an academic appointment. So childbirth accommodation funding, dependents may be eligible for health insurance, healthcare coverage, and then backup childcare and childcare reimbursement. So just a few smaller programs that are benefits of a student academic employment. I'm going to jump back to loans for a little bit because I know that some people are slightly concerned about taking loans. And so if you've borrowed loans as an undergraduate, I just want to make sure that you know that you do not need to make payments while you're in school. So when you are enrolled in the fall, Cal sends data over to the Department of Education that says this student is now registered as a graduate student, and your loans automatically go into what's called forbearance. If you wish to make payments while you're in school, you absolutely can do that, but just know that it's not required of you. There is a lot of information out right now in regards to loan forgiveness programs and loan forgiveness in general. There are programs out there, and yes, they can be pretty complex because you have to be in the right repayment program. You need to meet certain criteria, but there are programs out there. And if you have questions about that, we would direct you to the financial aid office. And then lastly, the best practice and piece of advice that we can share with you all is that if you have any funding questions, financial aid issues in general, you have a question about your bill, please communicate that with your GSAO, your student affairs officer, because that person is the first person that will be able to connect you to the right person, or actually already have the answer and let you know what the solution or the resolve is. Some outside funding sources that we've pulled together and we want to share with you. So the first one is called Scholarship Connection. It's a pretty robust and broad program to research any type of outside funding. And then our colleagues over at UCLA, they've compiled a pretty robust database where you put some demographic information in, what you're studying, they take a lot of information from you, and then they were able to share out any type of funding opportunity that might be a fit for you. And so if you just Google UCLA and grapes, it will pull right up for you. And then lastly, please always check our graduate division fellowship page. We update that once we have information about deadlines or about programs. We want to make sure that you are aware of that, and we update that probably once a quarter or so. So again, another resource for you to keep checking and continually checking. There's a lot of pieces that come into play when you're a graduate student, and so we just want to make sure that you're always contacting the right person. Again, you can't bring this home enough, is that your advisor is always going to be your first line of someone that you want to talk to if you have any questions. Financial aid, again, they're the ones that keep the FAFSA on file. They can make adjustments to your FAFSA, cost of attendance questions, and then also your loan eligibility. If you do have questions about an academic appointment, or you have an academic appointment and you have some questions in regards to that, again, it's going to be your department. If there's any international students on this call, there is a dedicated international office that can help you through several different things regarding visas to funding. All of those types of high-level questions would go directly to our international office. And then we have a complete office within the graduate division for undergrads. And so again, that would be a place if you had questions about resources, about any type of applications, that would be your go-to for that. And I just want to share that out with you. It's pretty broad, but it is, we do have several different offices on campus dedicated to your support. I'm going to drop that here, and then it leaves us quite a significant amount of time for questions. And so I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and then we can maybe go through the Q&A. If that's, Nikki, if that's okay with you, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I had some starter questions we could have done, but since there seems to be a healthily populated Q&A, I feel like it's a good idea just to jump into them, and you can choose which ones you think are most helpful to ask. And I know that the whole very helpful gang is also answering them as we go. So if you want to take a look at the Q&A, feel free, or I can try and suggest some helpful ones, but I want to defer to you, Deanne.
Well, Deanne, I did want to maybe start out with one that I'm seeing several times in the Q&A. It's regards to the delay with FAFSA and how that's going to affect the financial awards this year.
So you're absolutely correct to be a little worried or anxious about it, because there is a FAFSA delay, meaning that UC Berkeley is traditionally would have received FAFSAs early January, and now they're not receiving them until around this time, March. What that means for graduate students is that your awarding information will likely not see much impact, which is a good thing, because graduate students have their intent to register is later for the most part. And so also information about their funding generally comes later too, in the late spring. So it's not anything that you're going to miss out on as far as eligibility, because your FAFSA was received later. It does make it quite challenging if you are really trying to look at loans, if you are dependent on loans. But to give you some peace of mind, loans are available and they're fixed. So all students will have $20,500 in an unsubsidized loan for a graduate student. And then the rest of the cost of education, you can take in what's called a Graduate Plus loan. That doesn't change from institution to institution. What does change is the funding you might receive from a department. And so if you're receiving other institutions with offers from department funding, not loan funding or not federal funding, that's something that you might take over to your department to ask, I'm already getting letters about my funding at a different institution. And if you haven't heard from your department, then you would want to, again, talk to your department about any funding they would be able to provide. Now, our departments are actively putting together funding packages without loans, because loans, again, come from a different office. But just if you have questions about what you might receive from the department, you would talk to the department. The financial aid office will be sending loan offers again late spring. So I hope that's helpful. You're not missing out, or you're not going to be overlooked because of the FAFSA being late. You will still receive your loan eligibility. I hope that helps. If not, let me know.
Adele, we see your hand raised. Do you want to unmute and answer your question?
Should we try a different question? I'm not sure if Adele's speaking, I can't hear. I'm not sure if anyone else is, if I'm interrupting.
I apologize. I forgot to mention, I forgot for this session, we are only using the Q&A. So if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A and we'll try and do our best to get to it.
Okay, that's what I thought. I probably should have mentioned that then. Since I'm talking, I saw a question in the chat about GSIing, and while I am not a master's student, I am a GSI, and I've GSI for about 6 semesters. So I felt that maybe I could jump in and maybe answer those questions. So what is the timeline for applying to and getting GSI positions? How many hours a week do GSIs typically work? And how much do they get paid? A lot of that will be department dependent. I know in my department in sociology, they will kind of do usually a couple of weeks, usually halfway through the semester, they'll put out the form for next semester, and then you choose what you might want to do. As for working hours, we have, our union has set legal limits that we can't work past a certain amount. We're not supposed to work, I believe, over 20 hours a week at a 50% percentage of how much we work, though there can be changes if you take a 75% kind of appointment or something. How much you make will also be partially dependent on your department. And I'm not sure, maybe the financial aid folks can speak to this, whether there are differences in the pay structure for master students, but I know in my department, I make 36K, but some departments will pay more out of pocket to their students, and other departments will just give what is the baseline pay for GSIs. So it can really vary. And to answer our second question, you don't need any experience to be a GSI. I think a lot of people teach for the first time being a GSI. So yeah, we just had a huge strike. So we just kind of secured some more pay. But yeah, if you have any questions about being a GSI that are specific to teaching experience, please feel free to reach out to me. But that's that question. A lot of it is unfortunately departmental specific, which is why I wasn't able to give extremely specific answers. But good question. Let's see. We're getting a lot of questions about international students. I don't know if anyone wants to pick at one of those, because they all seem pretty useful, but I guess someone had a question, what is the percentage that international students can work as a GSI or other jobs on campus to support their finances? And do you have tips on how to secure those positions, Deanna, or if anyone else wants to jump in on that?
As far as if international students receiving an academic appointment, it's the same for it's the same for all students. And so typically 25 to 50% of an appointment is what's typical for a student. I am seeing a lot of international questions in regards to funding. And for that, what we can encourage you to do is to reach out to your department for any questions that you might have about funding eligibility for your department. Any other questions in regards to other international student issues? Again, the international office is a really good resource to access. And then they also, as the international office also does have information about any type of funding support that they offer to students. And typically support looks like to an international student once you are here and have been enrolled and have had at least a semester completed within your program. So again, international students, I know that's not super helpful or specific, but we do need to direct you back to your department for any questions in regards to funding. Another question I just want to answer live is that, should I still complete the FAFSA even though I've been awarded a department fellowship? And the question is, we do encourage all students to complete a FAFSA if they meet the eligibility requirements of being a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, or actually doing a DREAM Act if you are an AB 540 student. And the reason for that is because there might be times where you are in an emergency circumstance and you would have some type of loan eligibility available to you, or some departments look at FAFSA information to determine any need-based funding that they might have. And so while it's not mandatory, we do encourage it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be today or for the beginning of the semester, but we do encourage it at some point that you file a FAFSA during your program, so that information is readily available should your department need it or should you need it.
And I'm seeing several questions in regards to negotiating or appealing your funding offer, and if that's something that can be done.
Ken, can you answer that one? Because I feel like you feel very strongly about that.
Hi, all. My name's Ken Maru. I'm the Director of Graduate Student Funding here in the Graduate Division. Sorry, just please tell me the question one more time. I was answering questions in the Q&A.
I can. So I'm just seeing several questions in regards to appealing your funding offer or negotiating your offer, and
Yeah,
if that's allowable.
yeah. Deanne punts this one to me because I do think that you can do this. I think that it is to your advantage to ask nicely if if your department has other opportunities, if they can do better, if you have a competing offer, to share that with your department, ask them to meet it, to match it, to better it. That doesn't mean that they're able to do so. So you have to be able to accept that sometimes the answer is no, but you'll never get a yes unless you ask. And I just always suggest you ask very kindly and with some kind of what I'm trying to say. If you have some kind of competing offer is always the best way to go about it. But as I recently heard someone talking about when they get a new job offer, the first thing they say when they get their salary offer is, "Can you do better?"
Thanks, Ken. That was really helpful. We're getting, again, a lot of really good international-based questions. Really, a lot of these can be chosen, but just maybe to get the ball rolling, here's more of a specific one, I guess. For international students, it says F1 and J1 international students are not eligible to accept work-study jobs, so our GSI position is not applicable for these visas.
I'm going to have to punt that to somebody on the team to ask, to answer, I mean.
Happy to try to answer, but again, I jump right back into the Q&A, so just please repeat the question.
Sure, sorry, I know you're handling a lot. For international students, it says F1 and J1 international students are not eligible to accept work-study jobs, so our GSI positions not applicable for these visas.
No, GSI positions are not considered work study at all. Work study is a particular program that matches, it sort of splits the cost with the department. The part that the department doesn't pay is usually part of financial aid. That is not the same for most ASE or GSI appointments. So a GSI is an ASE appointment, an academic student employment. It includes GSIs, graduate student instructors, readers and tutors, or GSRs. So these are all opportunities that would be open to international students, provided your visa allows for it.
Thank you so much again. Let's see.
If you don't mind, Nikki, I
Oh,
have
please
a
go ahead.
question. Ian, can you clarify how a financial award letter differs from financial aid? Some people are wondering how once the FAFSA comes through and you receive your financial aid, how that'll affect your award letter.
That's a good question. So again, because they're coming from two separate areas, your department will be sending you information separate from what the financial aid office sends you. And so your department, if you're receiving any funding from your department, it's going to look really formal. It's going to have very detailed information about what they're offering you, what the amount is, and how it will be divided over the course of your program. Department funding, or I should say like free money, grants, those type of funds are always going to be set and they are the priority for you. Now, let's say you've filled out a FAFSA and you're also eligible for some loan funding. That information will be coming to you via an email notification. And what the email will instruct you to do is to take a look at your Cal Student Central to see what your loan eligibility is. Now, when you go to your Cal Student Central, you will see department funding, or you may or may not see department funding, but you have your letter. But you will see the type of loan offers that you are eligible for. And you can accept those loan offers or decline them right online. Your department funding will always, again, be the priority and won't go away because you've been offered loans. And I know that might be a question that necessarily isn't being asked, but I know that that has come up before, is if I receive loans or loan eligibility, does it impact my department funding? And the answer is going to be no. Your department funding, your free money, is always going to be the priority for you, first and foremost.
I'm also seeing some questions in regards to GSI appointments. Nikki, maybe you can speak to this. What is the best way to find them? How likely are you to receive them from your department? And how does the tuition and fee remission work with them?
Sure. So again, my one disclaimer is that I'm not a master's student, so I am kind of working in the doctoral kind of world, but for GSIing, it's a lot of overlap. So, the one difference that is relevant is that I didn't have to teach my first year because I'm here forever. But what I would do, since you guys are here for generally a shorter time, I would reach out to your department. Everyone's department or program will kind of have their own way of organizing when GSI applications will be opened and how GSIs are kind of disseminated amongst students. So that would be my first suggestion, is reach out to your department to see how their GSI structure works. Generally, another question I saw related is there training? I'm pretty sure everyone needs to take, at least in my department, I'm pretty sure most departments, you have to take a pedagogy course, which can look different in different departments, where it gives you basic knowledge about kind of how to teach, what teaching is like at Berkeley. It's pretty low key. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It really is kind of a try your best thing. In terms of kind of the hours, again, I think baseline work is about 20 hours a week. Someone asked if there's like a 10 hours a week GSI. That is not something I'm familiar with, but perhaps in other departments, people are employed as 10-hour a week, so 25% GSIs. I think a 25% appointment is much more common with a GSR, which is more just like a research position, not teaching, which are a slightly different bag, a slightly different way of doing work. It's a bit more individualized. It can vary, whereas GSIing, I think, is kind of spread out across the university in similar ways. So my main suggestion would be to reach out to your department as soon as possible to inquire about how you might go about getting a GSI and what that process is like. And generally expect 20 hours a week. Just kind of trying to hit these off at the same time so we can get back to the questions I know less about. Someone asked, how do you make time for all of this? In all honesty, it's difficult. If you're working a normal 50% appointment, you do have to learn how to organize your time and to keep on top of your research. Unless you have a really cool department, no one's going to make specific accommodations for you to have tons of extra time to do work. That's kind of just part of being in graduate school, but that doesn't mean there aren't resources to help you. And generally, in my experience, GSIs are very kind and open and would love to share resources with each other. So if you do find yourself taking a GSI position, reach out to the other people in your department who've done it before, and they can give you just general tips on how to kind of balance work and life and research. Those are my general suggestions. Again, if you ever want to talk GSIing and what that holistic process is like, I can drop my email in the chat and we can reach out about that. But that's just one facet of potential work options at the university. Hope that helps. If anyone else has a
Nikki,
question.
maybe could you also, I think we just need to define GSI versus GSR?
Oh, yeah.
And what do you mean by 50%? What does that mean? And when does the fee remission kick in? At what percentage?
Yes, great questions. This is how I know I've been here too long, because I'm using a ton of phrases that make no sense in the context. So and I can only speak from my general knowledge of these things. So the percentage really is just kind of a approximation of the hours in the most basic sense, and the amount of students that you're going to be teaching, especially. So for my 50% appointment, I work 20 hours a week. I teach 40 students, which is 2 sections. So 2 classes essentially within a lecture. Though again, this, the amount of GSIs you may be working with can change. And GSI stands for Graduate Student Instructor. It's basically Berkeley's version of a TA. So just like a teaching assistant, you work with the professor who's teaching a larger lecture course, and you are organizing their class discussion sections where they can talk about the material in a smaller context outside of the larger lecture space. The GSR stands for Graduate Student Researcher. These can take a lot of different forms. Usually you're working with either a kind of group on campus, so like, a labor research group, or you could be working with a specific professor, or basically you'll be helping them with some kind of project. And that is usually a little less work per week. I think it's very common to take a 10-hour GSR, but I think, higher hour GSRs are available. Now, someone will need to correct me, because I've always gotten fee remission by working at a 50% percentage, and I do not remember when fee remission kicks in. I don't know if it's at 25% or only 50. So someone needs to fact check me on that. But I know
It
at
is
50.
25%.
25%
25%.
provided that your appointment starts the first day of the semester and ends the last day of the semester. Shorter appointments at 25% may not be fee remission eligible.
Thank you so much. I didn't remember that, so thank you so much, Ken. I think it was Ken who was saying that. And just so we know what fee remission is, essentially, every semester you're, required to be paying essentially tuition, and all the stuff that an undergrad would have to pay for. And fee remission essentially means that the department / the university, another clarification that someone can say, but essentially they take care of those fees for you. So you don't have to pay like $10,000 per semester for all those fees, that you have to pay on top of everything. So fee remission is kind of an important bag to get, or at least being very aware when a position does not include fee remission, because that means you'll be footing the bill for some stuff. And sometimes that makes sense to do, and other times it doesn't. So when applying for any position, be it a GSI or a GSR, make sure you're very aware of the fact that you're receiving fee remission or not. Like Ken said, usually at a 25% appointment, provided it's the full semester length, you will get fee remission. But yeah, I know most GSIs do a 50% appointment, though it's definitely not unheard of to go above or below. I think that's it. I've been talking for a while, so I want to make sure we get to other very important questions. But thank you for asking me about it. I'm definitely not an expert. Oh, I guess one last thing. In terms of what are the hours that you're using working, like you will not be teaching 20 hours a week. I teach 4 hours a week, but there's kind of some stuff built into that. The time that you'll be spending going to lecture, the time that you'll be spending grading, the time that you'll be spending preparing lessons and class prep and stuff like that, all goes into the 20 hours or X hours that you'll be working. So do not be under the misunderstanding that you'll be just teaching all day, every day. I teach 2 sections twice a week. So that is generally what these hours are looking like. So it's a holistic kind of capturing of the amount of your life you'll be spending on teaching.
I do want to mention that I see some questions in regards to visas and working on campus as an international student. I do want to recommend there is a session tomorrow, or excuse me, this afternoon for international students. So we will have a representative from the international office there, and that might be a better place to ask some of these questions. If you cannot attend that, I do recommend reaching out to them since visa questions are very specific to the country that you're coming from and such. So it's the Berkeley International Office.
Someone asked if my GSI position salary covers my cost of living. On paper, I suppose the answer is yes. I suppose at this point, if you're considering coming to Berkeley, you know that living in the Bay can be expensive. So I would say that I am able to pay my bills and live in a house. I will be honest and say that it is tight. It is not comfortable for me. If you have maybe a spouse or maybe you just have savings from whatever you may have been doing before this, you may be more comfortable, but that is something you may be grumbling with your fellow workers here about, is not being paid enough. And that's kind of just part of the system that we are trying to kind of negotiate as workers. Our current GSR contract will expire in 2025. We will probably go on strike again. That's how it goes. And again, the amount of money you make can be also very dependent on your department. Some departments give huge amounts of extra money to their students, like some of the STEM departments compared to maybe some departments like rhetoric or English that don't pay as much, but it's really dependent. I guess the last related thing is, how do you balance teaching and studying? It's kind of a practice that you have to do. And everyone can share their own opinion on it. I encourage everyone to do that. The first thing is to make sure you're not going over those 20 hours. If you find yourself spending a ton of time doing all this extra work, do not do that. Speak to your professor, the teacher of the course, and also reach out to your fellow students for help. I know in my department we share, slides, resources, test prep, all this stuff. And really, it's just a process of organizing your time and trying to give yourself as much grace as you can, because it is difficult to have to balance that stuff. We're down to the last couple questions. What pays better, a GSI or a GSR? I think that question is very dependent on the context of whatever GSI or GSR you're taking. Some GSRs can pay very well. Some GSIs, especially if you take on extra classes, which you generally have to get approval from for the department, you can pay extra. I know someone who's taken on like 2 extra sections in my class this semester. That'll get you paid more. But there's really no obvious, like, you're gonna get paid more doing one or the other. It really depends on the context of the position. So I encourage you to read the position details, because that will tell you how much you get paid. Oh, that's a good question, Vlada. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. If you're using a master's to pivot subject areas you cannot teach in the department of the master's, can you teach in your department undergrad field, essentially? Well, firstly, again, you don't have to have a ton of experience. Unless this is an extreme pivot, your department will probably just let you teach in that department. However, I do know a lot of departments will let people from outside the department teach. It's just usually a little more effort. You need to reach out to that department, and generally they're gonna sometimes very like in a low-key way, and other times very specifically ask you what your experience is in that field, just so they know that you have some general understanding of the topic. So there's no hard or fast rule against it. It's just another reach out to that department, and most departments I think are often looking for GSI, so that is definitely possible. Yeah, I just want to, at this point, with about 7 or 8 minutes left, just want to give space to the rest of our amazing staff here if they want to answer anything else that is not directly related to being a GSI, and make sure you guys have whatever time you need to kind of say what you need to say to everyone here.
I think, again, we just want to reiterate our gratitude and thank you for joining us this morning, and that we look forward to seeing you on campus. And if, again, you have any questions, to, again, reach out to your department. If you can't get a hold of your department, you can go ahead and reach out to us, and we can help find that person for you, or perhaps assist you in any questions that you might have. But again, thank you for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Deanne, and everyone else for your amazing, helpful comments. As you can see, even though I've been teaching for this long, there's still things I don't know very well to explain. I'll also just put my email in the chat if anyone else wants to reach out. I'm always willing to chat about GSI. Again, I am not a master's or professional student, so I can only be so helpful, but I have been a teacher here for a minute, and it can be kind of scary to try to think about doing work on top of all of your personal research. So I want to make myself a resource for that. So thanks everyone for coming. And if that's it, then yeah, I'll leave it to anyone else if they have anything they want to share. But I think most of the questions have been answered. So awesome. Okay. Yeah, so if that's it, no one else has anything, I guess we can wrap it up, but I'll leave that to the professional staff to decide. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. I think we have one last question
Oh.
as to what is non-resident supplemental tuition? Deanne, I don't know if you could, or can somebody?
I'm looking on the registrar's website to try to find a more neutral definition, because I start to talk about education in the state of California when people ask me about this, which is to say that colleges in the state of California are for the benefit of the people of California. When people come from outside the state of California, they're assessed an additional fee, which is tuition, the non-resident supplemental tuition.
Okay, I think the last question I'm seeing is, when can we get access to Handshake? I suppose you can only get that once you have a Cal ID and stuff, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And you will need to formally submit your statement of intent to register, or your SIR form, and then you will receive an email about how to create your CalMed ID.
All right. I think that's it then, actually. With 3 minutes to spare, so that's great work. I just want to say thank you to everyone who came, and thank you so much to our amazing staff with all these super, super helpful bits of information and resources that you offer. I think we all appreciate you very much. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to have been able to moderate this session. So with that, unless there are any other questions jumping in, I think we can call it, and I hope everyone has a great day and enjoys the rest of the Experience Diversity webinars, and have a great rest of your weekend.